I like fire. I like ice. But which one is best? There's only one way to find out. Fight! Hello and welcome to the Friday Fantasy Show from the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter and today we're going to be taking a look at Fire and Ice, which is an animated 1983 fantasy film from Ralph Bakshi. I think that's how you pronounce it. No, it's not that, is it? But yes, it is. Bakshi. Anyway, let's move on. We've also reviewed a few other of his films. We're on an animation roll here because we've reviewed Lord of the Rings, the animated version, and also Wizards. So check those reviews out. They're by the same director. He also directed Fritz the Cat, which is a bit of a cult film. It's not fantasy as far as I'm aware, and it's very adult. Anyway, let's see what Ralph brings to the Sword and Sandals genre of fantasy. So, what's it all about? As I said, it's sword and sandals, or sword and sorcery. That's a subgenre of fantasy. And I thought it'd be interesting to look at this. It's not, I'll just be upfront, it's not my favourite subgenre in fantasy. Conan and Barbarian, I've not really got into that. But it's that kind of thing. So, it seems, on the front of it, a pretty straightforward sword and sandals. The plot is basically there's an evil queen that then has a son, and then they want to take over the land. They want to take over all of the land, and of course, not everybody's happy about that. So there's a king who has a kingdom, and he is trying to stop them, and that seems to be pretty much the plot. But there are maybe one subplot that goes on very vaguely. You've got a few heroes, obviously barbarian type heroes. You throw in a few other sort of henchmen, evil baddies. You've got a few kind of orc-like creatures. They're the evil queen's race of people, if you like, versus the humans. And there we are. That's the setup. So there's nothing particularly original about it, but hey, that shouldn't stop somebody from wanting to explore this subgenre or any subgenre of any genre and doing their thing with it. And as I said, it's very much the barbarian sort of atmosphere, that sort of sword and sandals, very savage. It's sort of primitive civilization. You've got a few civilized towns, maybe a kingdom that is actually a bit more technology advanced. That's not quite the word. You've got magic thrown in there, which again is great, but it's normally dark magic. You've got barbarian heroes, as I say. You've got evil queens and good kings. You've got wild and epic landscapes that scatter through this film. You've got weird and wonderful creatures that inhabit these landscapes. Some wild, some are tame. And then you've also got, sort of ancient civilizations. There are a number of themes in this film as well, war being maybe the main theme, because obviously, as I say, it's basically an evil queen wanting to extend her queenship and take over other lands. And also there's politics, so that involves politics. Now, what I was a little bit surprised at is there is attempts on both sides to settle for peace, and for one reason or another, neither of them come to that agreement. So I was slightly like, oh, okay, this is a little bit more in depth than I was first, thought. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't have great expectations for this film. The artwork on the cover, is kind of, we've seen this all before, but then, maybe there's something else in there. So I was a little bit, is this going to be a film that I'm really going to enjoy? So it was nice that they'd put a layer of political intrigue into this as well. Obviously, it's nothing like Game of Thrones, if you know about the political intrigue there, but it was nice to put it in there. It made it a little bit more three-dimensional. Another theme is survival. And maybe this greatest strength for this film is the landscapes and the actual world that they've created. they've done some beautiful, landscape shots and different types as well. You've got the jungle, you've got swampland, you've got sort of the flatlands, you've got ancient civilizations. And then you've got kind of more dark and creepy kind of atmospheric landscapes as well for the Evil Queen. So they've done a really good job. It really does feel like you're going on a big, sort of long mission, if you like, a big long quest. And the use of the weather, there's a snowstorm that happens towards the end of the film, and that really was done brilliantly. I really liked that as well. So landscape, I say, was a theme in itself, because it was all about survival and how these characters can survive. So not only, it was kind of like a third element that they had to deal with. So not only are they, fighting their enemy, they're also fighting the landscape as well, and the creatures that, can jump out and attack them for no apparent reason apart from they're creatures and they're hunting, and they have no political alliance. I really love that touch. It added a little bit more depth to this film. Then you got good versus evil, as you would expect. It's very black and white, this. It's very, if you're evil, you're evil. If you're good, you're good. There's no real kind of in-between. But that's fine. That's part of this subgenre. And if you're cool with that, then, yeah, this is what you would expect. Also, what I kind of derived from that, the ignorance equals evil. Now, when I kind of came to that conclusion, I thought, well, yeah, that's actually a thing, isn't it? When people say ignorance, I've heard that before, ignorance is evil. And it was quite well crystallized in this fact. You've got the kind of orcs type creatures, the savages, who are ignorant of life and are ignorant of, of other cultures and, and civilization. And so they're ignorant of that, and therefore all they know is, to smash and to destroy. And so there's a level of ignorance there about other people and other ways of behaving and living and interacting with other creatures. So again, that was nicely played out. The production values, it is interesting, because the production, the actual style of illustration really did remind me of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which isn't a bad thing. It's just kind of, oh hello, a bit more spooky atmosphere. We've just kind of, it was that sort of less detail. It was very, not generic. I don't want to say generic. I don't want to say polished, realistic. But it wasn't gritty. It didn't have a certain artistic quality to it. But in a way, it didn't need to. And that sounds very mean, because obviously it's an artistic style in itself. But it's very particular to the 80s. That's how I felt about it, 70s and 80s. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that fantasy kind of had that image, doesn't it, of that, that type of illustration. And it would have been nice to have a different one, but then it's very much of its era. So I'm kind of contradicting myself here. So it did remind me of He-Man. There was some of the detail on the characters weren't there, and some of the backgrounds weren't there. But that's fair enough. That's what I'm saying. That was in a way, part of its charm. And you can kind of look back on this as almost like a period piece from a film point of view. But the animation, although it was a bit less detailed, it was very realistic. It was very well done. It was very believable. All the characters had weight to them. You felt like they were actually properly 3D, living, breathing creatures and humans. The magic was well done in it. And as I say, I was really impressed with the landscape and what they did with that, and the weather conditions when they, this snowstorm was very realistic. And they actually did rotoscoping, and this was, I guess, still in the early stages, of rotoscoping. The director had done this previously in Lord of the Rings, and it was very evocative, very powerful way of animating, where you shoot the actors live on film, acting out the scenes, and then you illustrate over each cell. So a very long and drawn out process, but very effective, really added to this. And they still kept it an animation, whereas in the Lord of the Rings animation, you could kind of see it was more filmatic, more live action with sketches over it. This was much tighter in terms of it still looked like an illustration rather than there was a little bit of film. You could sort of see the actors behind it. But that said, they used the technique to give a really good realistic presence to the film. And as I say, it really felt believable. The music was a little bit melodramatic to begin with, a little bit over the top. It was a bit, yes, this is going to be very epic. It was a little bit too spoon-fed for me to begin with. Then it settles down, and I then actually started to enjoy the score. It did actually work for what it was trying to do in each scene. It wasn't cheesy. This was it. The script, I was expecting it to be very cheesy and just a bit corny, but it wasn't. It took itself seriously, which I think you have to in this subgenre, and they played it straight. And what I really loved about that is that they didn't info dump. They didn't try to put all information in by saying, "Hello there, cousin. You are married to so and so," and and actually have characters sort of talk in a way that's giving you information. No, he didn't do any of that. It just assumed you knew all about the world, which is great when you get that because you're discovering it. And if you don't get everything straight away, you will, because it will unfold in a natural way. So, for example, they might be walking through a jungle and then a creature just suddenly comes and attacks them. There was no explanation. There was no reason why. It just happened, and it's like, yeah, brilliant. I need it. I didn't want them to go, oh, don't go into the woods because there's creatures living in there. No, it just happened, and that was good. They showed, not told, which is the mistake that some storytellers do, is that they tell rather than show. And obviously if you're working in a visual medium such as film, then you're going to need to show as much as possible. And they kept the script very economical. They didn't waste anything. They didn't put in dialogue for dialogue's sake. They didn't need to fill the space. And it really helped that, as I say, the pacing of this was excellent as well. I was really surprised. I must admit, I came in with very, very low expectations of this film, and was pleasantly surprised. The direction was very good. There was some very good dynamic angles, and it seemed very modern as well. And considering this is nearly 20, 30 years old now, the direction was excellent. Really, really enjoyed the direction. It really moved along on a real pace. It's very economical. Each scene led to another. The storyline, very thin. The plot was very thin, but in a way it didn't really matter. Things happened. It was like a series of events that happened, but enjoyable nonetheless. And you kind of knew the plot. It was, one person is going to go and attack that person. You had a few heroes. I don't want to give away the plot too much, but it wasn't particularly complicated. But it was nice just being with those characters and just being in that world. They did a brilliant job of setting up the realistic world. You believed the magic. You believed that these weird and wonderful creatures were roaming around. It works. It was a very strange experience, right? There wasn't a lot of plot going on, but somehow I did find it enjoyable, and I think the pacing had a lot to do with that as well. The film is an hour and a half, and they don't waste anything. It doesn't feel baggy. It didn't slow down. And there are talky points in it. It's not just all action, and even that was quite gripping, the actual talking bits. There's a little bit of character development, not a lot, but a little bit. But then you don't expect that in a film like this. And as I say, it wasn't cheesy. There was a little bit of sexual exploitation in this film, just a little bit. They could have maybe toned that down a bit, not had it at all. But saying that, the main female character wasn't too stereotypical of the weak female that needs to be rescued. She actually had brains, and she could fight, and she used all of her charms, if you like, there was one bit where she kind of used her sexuality to get out of the situation from being captured. And I thought, okay, it's a little bit exploitation, but I thought fair enough, we could go with that, simply because she wasn't just like that all the way through the film. Plus there were other strong female characters in there, which I was very impressed with as well. Some of the characters, again, they're not 3D characters, these are cartoon characters, if you like, they are, but they were enjoyable nonetheless. But for me, and I keep banging on about the landscape, I really like the way they presented the landscape. Lots of different terrain, different feel. It gave a big epic feel to this film, which was brilliant. And also the weather. Having rain and having snow really changes an atmosphere of a scene. Really loved the way they did that. And magic was all part of the fabric of the world. You believed it. That was the main fancy bit. There were a few fancy creatures in there as well. But again, it wasn't explained, it just was. And that is, what I like about magic. You don't have to explain it. It's not science, it's not sci-fi. You don't have to explain it. But it had its own rules, and it didn't break the rules. It kept the believability aspect to what they were trying to do. So overall, yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought this was just going to be very low quality, very run-of-the-mill. The plot is very standard. There's nothing unique. It's not going to blow your mind. You're not going to go, wow, I must watch that again immediately. But saying that, it is a great kind of action popcorn film that if it's a rainy Sunday afternoon, you could watch a lot worse. This at least it gave me a sense of satisfaction. I actually felt like I was with these characters going on their journey, trying to accomplish their quest with them. And, you know, there's a little morality bit at the end, which is a little bit cheesy, but that was probably it. So I really enjoyed this film much more than I thought I was going to. Now, as I say, I'm not a big Sword and Sandals fan, and that's mainly because of the lack of character development, you know, and the plots are a bit thin. So maybe it's a bit more of a genre I should look into. So maybe we should look at Conan the Barbarian, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Anyway, there we go. I would recommend this, but don't expect anything amazing. It's a bit standard, but there's a lot going for it. So if you've got a spare Sunday afternoon, yeah, crack open the Fire and Ice. Fire and Ice. There we go. I hope you enjoyed that. One thing I will say, the fighting sequences, a lot of fighting sequences, very well done. You know, it was all believable. It didn't look like they were, you know, just rubbery punches or anything like that. Very well done. Yeah, there we go. Fire and Ice. Pleasantly surprised. I didn't think I would be. Thank you so much for watching. As I say, you can check out his other films we reviewed, Lord of the Rings animation and Wizards. Until next time, remember, keep it unreal, especially if you like fire and you like ice.